Before we dive into this story, we'd love for you to become a part of our storytelling community. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we release new stories. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's get started. The Lawson household looked normal on the outside, a small, weathered home in a quiet neighborhood where the days blended into each other and everyone minded their business. Inside that house, Mrs. Lawson was already awake before the sun, moving quickly through the kitchen like someone trying to outrun time. She packed Tina's school lunch, reheated yesterday's coffee, and barely touched her breakfast. Her blazer was wrinkled from where it had been draped over a chair the night before, but she didn't have time to notice. Tina, just 10, sat at the table with bright eyes and toast in hand. She always woke up early to spend a few minutes with her mom before school, even though those minutes were usually filled with silence or last-minute reminders. "Your sandwich is in your bag. Don't forget your math homework again," Mrs. Lawson said without looking up. Tina nodded, chewing slowly. She didn't mind the rush. She was used to it. "Daddy helped me with it." "We practiced the times tables," Tina offered, hoping it would earn her a smile. "Good," her mother replied. "I've got meetings all day. I won't be home for dinner." Across the room, Mr. Lawson stood by the stove, flipping pancakes without much interest. He had been out of work for 5 months now. The layoff was sudden, and the job search had been quiet, too quiet. Mrs. Lawson had picked up more shifts to make up for the missing income, but the strain showed in the way she moved, spoke, and especially in how she stopped speaking to him. When she leaned down to kiss Tina's forehead, she gave her husband nothing more than a nod. The door closed behind her, and just like that, she was gone for another 12 hours. Tina turned to her dad. "Can we finish the puzzle later?" He looked at her and forced a smile. "Of course, just you and me, kiddo." That was how it had been for weeks. While her mother worked long hours, Tina found herself spending more and more time with her father. He helped her with homework, braided her hair when she asked, and let her stay up a little late on Fridays. He was patient, even playful. To her, he was the warmest part of her home. But things were starting to change, slowly, almost invisibly. That afternoon, Tina skipped through the front door, backpack bouncing, chattering about her day. Her father listened and nodded, laughing at her jokes, asking questions. She told him about a boy at school who ate glue. He chuckled and asked if she wanted to help him make spaghetti. They cooked together, danced a little in the kitchen, and played their usual board game after dinner. It felt normal. But later, after she went to bed, something shifted. Her father stood in the hallway for a few minutes longer than usual, just outside her room. He said nothing. He didn't knock or call out. He just stood there in the dark, breathing slowly before turning away and walking back down the hall. In the kitchen, he sat alone, staring into nothing. The house was utterly silent around him. His wife was asleep in their bedroom, fully clothed, her shoes still half on from work. She hadn't asked him about his day. She hadn't looked him in the eye in over a week. Tina, in her room, clutched her favorite stuffed animal and drifted into sleep, unaware of the tension building around her like a rope being pulled tighter, day by day. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, just heavy. It was the kind of quiet where things begin to break without a sound. The days started blending into each other after that. Mrs. Lawson was rarely home before dark anymore. There were always new deadlines, new emergencies at the office. When she did come home, she moved like a machine, phone in one hand, her purse in the other, eyes glazed over with exhaustion. The only words she gave her daughter were reminders, warnings, or clipped instructions. She didn't notice when Tina's drawings stopped going up on the fridge. She didn't ask why her daughter had become quieter at dinner. She didn't ask much of anything anymore. Mr. Lawson noticed. In fact, he noticed everything. He noticed when his wife began turning away from him at night, when she stopped asking how his day was, when her kisses became brief and her body language stiff. He noticed the way she recoiled when he reached for her shoulder in passing, how she avoided his gaze. It chipped away at him slowly, bitterly, like a man being erased in his own home. He stopped trying after a while. If she didn't want him, he'd stop wanting her back. But he didn't feel alone. Tina was still there. Tina still looked at him with admiration. She laughed at his jokes. She asked for his help with her backpack zipper, her science homework, the tangled knots in her shoelaces. She still wanted him around. And slowly, dangerously, that began to matter too much. One afternoon after school, Tina came home humming to herself. She tossed her bag by the door and ran to show her father a spelling test marked with a big red A. He beamed. "That's my girl." He scooped her up in a hug that lasted just a second too long. She laughed. "Daddy, you're squishing me." He laughed, too, but didn't let go right away. She wriggled until he finally put her down. She didn't think anything of it. That night, they watched a movie together while Mrs. Lawson stayed late again for a surprise meeting. Tina curled up next to him under a blanket. His arm rested across her shoulders. His eyes weren't on the movie. The next day, Tina came home to find her dad already waiting in the living room with a board game set up and snacks on the table. He had started doing that more often, preparing little surprises for her. He said it was because he missed her during the day. She believed him. That evening while they were playing, she leaned over to reach for a card. His hand brushed her leg. She flinched just a little. He laughed it off, called her jumpy, and gave her a candy. Later that week, Mrs. Lawson came home to find Tina asleep on the couch, curled up next to her dad. He was watching the news and barely looked up. She muttered something about needing to check emails and disappeared into the bedroom without a second glance. She didn't ask why Tina had started sleeping in her clothes more often, or why she seemed distracted in the mornings, or why her daughter no longer came running to the door when she got home. Tina didn't know how to explain it. Things still felt mostly okay. Her dad still made her laugh, still cooked dinner, still helped her wash her hair. But sometimes, his hands stayed longer than they should. Sometimes he looked at her for too long when she got out of the bath. She told herself it was probably nothing. Maybe he was just lonely. Maybe he was just a weird face. One evening, he asked her to play a quiet game in her room. She hesitated. "But Mommy said I need to read for school." "She's not home yet," he said gently. "And you already read yesterday?" The game didn't feel like a game. It made her uncomfortable. He touched her back. Then her stomach. She froze. When she said, "Stop," he smiled like it was a joke and told her she was so sensitive. Afterward, he gave her a popsicle and told her not to worry. "Just between us, okay?" Like a secret handshake. Tina didn't sleep that night. She curled up under her blanket, heart racing, her face burning with shame and confusion. She didn't cry, not yet. She didn't even fully understand what had happened. But she knew it wasn't right. The next morning, she didn't touch her cereal. She didn't talk on the way to school. Her drawings that day were darker, more scribbles than pictures. Her teacher asked if she was tired. She nodded. When she got home that day, she found her father smiling, waiting with another game. She told him she had a headache. He gave her a strange look, part frustration, part hurt. "Don't you want to spend time with me anymore?" She forced a smile. "Maybe later." He stared at her for a long moment before finally walking away. She wanted to run to her room and lock the door, but she didn't. She was afraid to make him angry. And her mother still wasn't home. Tina sat on the edge of the couch, clutching her knees to her chest. The television played softly in the background, but she wasn't watching. Her father sat beside her, unusually quiet. The room smelled like popcorn and dust. Outside, the sky was darkening into that quiet blue-gray shade just before night. She told him earlier she didn't feel like playing today. Her stomach hurt. She set her head. He hadn't said much then, just nodded and went about the evening. But now he was beside her, and she could feel it again, that look, that strange shift in the air. She didn't understand it fully, but it made her skin crawl. "You're always so quiet lately," he said after a long silence. "You don't talk to Daddy anymore?" "I'm tired," Tina whispered. "You used to be my little buddy," he said, leaning closer. "We'd laugh, play games. Now you act like you're scared of me." She didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around her knees. Then he changed the channel and turned to face her more directly. "Let's do something fun. Just you and me, like we used to." "I have homework," she said quickly. "It's in my bag." "I already helped you with it," he interrupted gently. "Remember? It's done." He smiled, but something about it felt wrong, too wide, too forced. He reached out and touched her cheek. She flinched. He paused, then let out a slow sigh. "Don't be silly. Come here." Tina shook her head. "I said come here." His voice had changed now. Not loud, but sharper, firmer, laced with something cold. She obeyed. Slowly, reluctantly, she slid closer. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her into a side hug. Too tight. Too long. "You don't have to be afraid. This is just how special people show they love each other," he said softly, his hand drifting lower. "It's just our secret." She froze. When he leaned down, she tried to pull away. "Daddy, no." But his grip tightened. "Don't ruin it, baby. You don't want to upset me, do you?" She whimpered. Her small voice barely made it past her throat. Then came the worst part, the confusion, the betrayal, the touch that should have felt safe but didn't. His face, once so familiar, now monstrous in its calmness. His words whispered like lullabies, twisting inside her like knives. It didn't last long, but time stretched inside her mind like a bad dream. When it ended, she curled into the corner of the couch, her knees tucked up, silent. He gave her a tissue, told her not to cry, that everything was okay, that she was still his good girl. "Remember," he said gently, "this is just our little moment. No one else would understand. Mommy would just get angry. She doesn't love either of us the way we love each other." She stared at the floor. Her world had tilted, cracked wide open. That night, she didn't eat dinner. Her father said she was just sick and let her go to bed early. Alone in her room, Tina sat on her bed in the dark, rocking slightly, gripping her stuffed bear so tightly her fingers turned white. She stared at the wall, unblinking. Down the hallway, she could hear the murmur of her parents arguing. It was muffled. Not about her, probably about bills or work or something she no longer cared to know. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell her mom. But her father's voice echoed in her mind. She won't believe you. She'll get mad at you. This is our secret, asterisk asterisk. Tears finally came, but even those were quiet. No one knocked on her door. No one asked why she hadn't touched her dinner. No one noticed the tiny stain on the back of her shorts the next morning, or the way she walked slower, with discomfort, down the stairs. At school, her teacher asked why she looked so pale. Just tired, Tina said with a shrug. Just tired. And when she came home that afternoon, her father was already waiting again. He smiled like nothing had happened. The days that followed were slow and heavy, like walking through water. Tina moved differently now. Her steps were smaller, cautious. When she sat down, she winced without meaning to. She flinched when anyone reached out to touch her, even gently, even at school. Her teachers noticed but assumed she was just tired, a little moody. 10-year-olds go through phases, after all. But it wasn't a phase. At home, everything looked normal. That was the worst part. Her father still cooked dinner. Still asked about school. Still made jokes that made her laugh, even if just for a second. And her mother still came home late, distracted and worn down, barely glancing at either of them as she peeled off her heels and opened her laptop. Again at the kitchen table, Tina tried once to talk. That Thursday evening, her mother was rinsing dishes while balancing her phone on one shoulder, typing something urgent with her free hand. Tina stood in the doorway for a full minute before speaking. "Mom." Her mother didn't turn. I don't like being alone with Daddy anymore." Mrs. Lawson, eyes still on the laptop, let out a tired breath. "Why? Did he say something?" Tina hesitated. Her voice became small. "He touches me. Weird." There was a pause, but not long enough. Her mother glanced at her, barely, then gave a tired, thin laugh. "Weird how? Like tickling? Your dad always plays around, sweetie." "No, it's different," Tina mumbled. Mrs. Lawson shook her head. "Honey, I don't have time for silly stories right now. I'm exhausted." Tina opened her mouth again, but footsteps came down the hallway. Her father's voice entered the room. "What are my girls chatting about?" Mrs. Lawson glanced at him, already distracted again. "Tina says you're being weird. Whatever that means." Mr. Lawson chuckled and ruffled Tina's hair. "Too hard, too long." "She's just being dramatic," he said easily. "Aren't you, Tina?" Tina looked at the floor. Her mother laughed softly and went back to typing. Just like that, it was over. That night, the game happened again. This time, Tina didn't say no. She didn't fight. She just lay there, silent and numb. Somewhere inside her, something had started to shut down, a slow collapsing, like a light being turned off room by room. When he left her room, she curled up in a ball and stared at the wall until morning. At school, she stopped speaking unless asked. Her drawings, once full of color, became gray scribbles. Her spelling tests came back with red marks now. Her teacher put a note in her file, sudden change in behavior. Monitor, asterisk asterisk. At home, the cycle repeated. Mr. Lawson grew bolder. He stopped hiding the way he stared at her. He found excuses to touch her more. Brushing her shoulder as he walked by, helping her get dressed when she didn't ask, calling her his little angel in a tone that made her skin crawl. Tina barely responded anymore. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't think anyone would care. Her mother hadn't noticed the quiet, or the bruises, or the way Tina had started locking the bathroom door. One evening, Tina sat in her room, staring at a small red mark on the inside of her thigh. She didn't remember when it had happened. Her memory was starting to blur. The moments all blended into each other now. She picked up her stuffed bear and squeezed it so hard the seams began to strain. I wanted to stop, she whispered. But no one heard. Not her mother, still buried in spreadsheets and exhaustion. Not her teachers, too busy to dig deeper. Not her father, who had twisted love into something sick and silent. She cried herself to sleep again that night. The pain had become routine. Tina sat in the school nurse's office again. Second time this month. She told her teacher her stomach hurt again, and when asked what she ate, she just shook her head. The nurse gave her some water and asked routine questions, her tone light, but slightly concerned. Are you sleeping okay, sweetheart? Tina shrugged. The nurse smiled gently. Are things okay at home? Tina's eyes flicked up, then away. Yeah, just tired. It was the same answer she gave to everything now. At home, the air was still tense. Mrs. Lawson had been sleeping on the couch some nights after arguments with her husband. Most were quiet fights, quick whispers, sharp sighs behind closed doors. Tina didn't know the words, but she could feel it. The disconnect. The way they passed each other like strangers in their own kitchen. It should have been a good thing. Maybe her mom being upset with Dad would help her to be heard. But even now, Mrs. Lawson was always distracted. Always in a rush. Too tired, too busy, too overwhelmed. One afternoon, Tina came home from school and sat quietly on the floor near the kitchen while her mom worked at the counter. Mrs. Lawson didn't even look up. How was school? Okay. Silence. I wanted to tell you something. Mrs. Lawson hummed, still typing. Tina hesitated. Her heart beat wildly in her chest. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. Daddy's hurting me. The words came out in a whisper. Mrs. Lawson froze. Not a dramatic freeze, just a pause. A blink. A breath. Then she exhaled and looked over her shoulder, her brows slightly furrowed. What do you mean? Tina didn't answer right away. Her face turned red. Her eyes welled. Mrs. Lawson turned around, finally giving her daughter a full look. Did he yell at you? Spank you or something? Tina shook her head. No. He touches me there. I don't like it. Her voice cracked on the last sentence. She started crying. For a moment, just one moment, Mrs. Lawson looked confused. Then something flickered in her eyes, fear, shock, disbelief. Before she could say anything, Mr. Lawson's voice drifted from the hallway. What's going on in here? He stepped into the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. Tina immediately froze, her body rigid. Mrs. Lawson noticed, but only briefly. The moment passed too fast. "She says you're hurting her," Mrs. Lawson said, crossing her arms, the tension already back in her tone. "You want to explain that?" Mr. Lawson blinked, then chuckled. "What? Me? Come on, Tina. What are you saying, sweetheart?" Tina stared at her socks, tears now falling silently. He walked over and knelt beside her, putting a hand on her back, the same hand. "Is this about the other night? When you had that nightmare, you were sleepwalking. Remember? I helped you back to bed." He looked up at his wife. "She's been a little mixed up lately. Stress maybe. Could be something she saw on YouTube. Kids hear all sorts of crazy stuff these days." Mrs. Lawson. "Tina. Is that what happened?" Tina wanted to scream. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her father's hand was still there. That hand. Her skin crawled beneath it. She felt trapped. Afraid. I don't know," she whispered. Mrs. Lawson shook her head. "Tina, if you're playing around, that's not okay." Mr. Lawson stood. "Come on, honey. You know Daddy would never hurt you." Tina didn't say a word. Her mother returned to her work. Her father stood over her, victorious. The moment passed. Her chance to speak, crushed beneath doubt, fear, and exhaustion. That night, she cried into her pillow, the ache in her chest far worse than anything else. She had told the truth, and no one had heard her. It was raining the day everything cracked open. Mrs. Lawson's meeting was cancelled last minute. She considered staying at the office to finish some reports, but something tugged at her, a tiredness that begged her to go home early just this once. She didn't text ahead. She wanted a quiet moment alone before the house filled with noise again. The sky was dark as she pulled into the driveway. The house looked peaceful. Lights on, curtains drawn. She walked to the front door, umbrella dripping. Unlocked, as always. Inside it was quiet. No TV. No clatter from the kitchen. Just silence. She kicked off her shoes, glanced at the time. Almost 5:30. Tina should be doing homework. Her husband probably cooking or lying on the couch with his phone. The usual. She called out softly, "I'm home." No answer. A strange feeling pricked at her chest. Not fear, just a slight disorientation. A wrongness she couldn't name. She dropped her bag by the wall and walked down the hallway. That's when she heard it. A sound. Muffled. A thud. Then a soft cry, faint, from Tina's room. Her breath caught. She moved quickly, heart starting to race, footsteps silent on the carpet. As she approached the door, she heard his voice, her husband's, low, coaxing. Too low. And Tina's voice. A whimper. Mrs. Lawson didn't knock. She flung the door open, and the world stopped. There, in the dimness of the room, she saw her husband, kneeling by the bed, too close to their daughter, whose shirt was pulled up halfway, whose legs were trembling, whose face was streaked with silent tears. He looked up, shocked. Caught. And in that split second, time folded in on itself. Everything made sense. The quiet. The awkward walking. The distant eyes. The half-confession she brushed aside. Rage surged through her like fire. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed, her voice sharp and trembling. Tina curled into herself, sobbing. Her father jumped back, stammering, pulling his hands away like they burned. Wait! Wait, it's not what it looks like. But Mrs. Lawson was already dialing. Don't move, she snapped. Don't touch her. Don't you even breathe near her. Her voice was shaking now. She backed away, phone to her ear, watching him with wild eyes. Tina cried harder, whispering, "I'm sorry," over and over. Mrs. Lawson's heart broke in 1,000 places at once. The police arrived within minutes. He didn't fight. He didn't say much. Just sat quietly as they read him his rights, as Tina clung to her mother's waist, trembling. The neighbors came out to stare. Mrs. Lawson held her daughter close, tighter than she ever had before, whispering apologies into her hair over and over again. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I should have known." Because now she finally saw everything. All the signs she'd ignored, dismissed, explained away. And it was too late to stop what had already been done. The house was quiet, not the usual tired kind of quiet. This was different. Heavy. Hollow. Tina sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, rocking slightly. She hadn't spoken since the police left, since her father was dragged out of the house in handcuffs, shouting that it was all a mistake. She hadn't even cried. Her eyes just stared at the wall, blank and unmoving. Mrs. Lawson sat nearby, stunned. Her hands trembled in her lap. She had found them. Her husband, the man she once loved, the man she thought she knew, crouched over their daughter. She still heard the sound Tina made when she opened the door. It wasn't a scream. It was smaller. More broken. Her mind repeated one thought: how didn't I see this? Tina didn't speak that night. She didn't want food. She didn't want hugs. She didn't want anything. The next morning, Mrs. Lawson called in to work. Then she called a counselor. The first therapy session was painful. Tina refused to go in at first. She clung to the edge of the car door, her tiny hands gripping the fabric like it was a lifeline. "It's just talking," Mrs. Lawson whispered. "You don't have to say anything. Just sit with her for a while. Please." Tina eventually agreed. She sat with her arms folded tightly, body tense. The therapist didn't push. She just sat nearby, soft voice, no pressure. The next session, Tina said one word. Then the next week, 3. Then one day, she cried. She cried for the whole session. And when she came out, Mrs. Lawson knelt down to hug her. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I'm so sorry." Tina didn't say anything, but she didn't pull away either. In the weeks that followed, healing was slow. Tina had nightmares, refused to sleep in her room, avoided loud voices and sudden movements. She sometimes stood frozen when a man passed them on the street. Sometimes she covered her ears and whispered to herself until the noise faded. Mrs. Lawson stayed by her side through it all. She changed her work schedule. She canceled unnecessary meetings. For the first time in years, she was truly present, not just physically, emotionally. And when the guilt became too heavy, she'd break down in the bathroom, away from Tina, covering her face so her daughter wouldn't see. Tina returned to school in small steps. A few hours a day. Then half days. The teachers were informed, privately, only what they needed to know. Tina was given space and a quiet room she could go to when overwhelmed. Mrs. Lawson kept up with therapy. She joined a support group, other parents whose children had gone through abuse. They sat in circles, sometimes talking, sometimes crying, sometimes sitting in silence, just not feeling so alone. One evening, Mrs. Lawson spoke. "I missed the signs," she said. "I didn't want to believe something that terrible could happen in my home. But it did. And I'll never ignore a whisper from my daughter again." Someone in the group reached for her hand. One night, after another silent dinner, Mrs. Lawson sat on the floor outside Tina's door. She didn't knock. She just sat there, back against the wall, listening to the faint sound of her daughter breathing on the other side. "I don't know how to fix this," she said quietly. "I don't know how to make it go away. But I'm not leaving. I'm right here." The silence stretched. Then a whisper came through the door. "I don't trust people anymore." Mrs. Lawson's voice cracked. "That's okay. Start with just one person. Start with me." Another pause. Then the door opened. Just a crack. Not enough to see Tina, just enough to know she was there. It wasn't a hug. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. I hope you learned something from this story. Please, if you haven't subscribed, kindly click on the subscribe button. Be a part of my growth. Turn on the notifications so that when I post more interesting stories, you'll be the first to get them. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for your consistent support.